Introduction to Business, and today we cover the topic of global business. A number of you have often expressed an interest in working in an international firm. Businesses today are very much a global enterprise. You can see during the pandemic how dependent we are on other countries for other things, in particular China. Pharmaceuticals and electronics and things like that. So let's talk about why we trade. We have imports. What do we import? Well, clearly, I think probably everybody knows that they're wearing something that was imported. Clothing is imported. We import cars. We import food. Think about it in the wintertime. Where do we get our fruits? Well, take a look. A lot of your fruit will be labeled from South America. Why do we import things? Well, why do we import clothing? Can't we make it here? Well, of course we can. We import things like clothing because it's cheaper to be made elsewhere. The standard of living in other countries is different. The pay is different, and so we can get things more cheaply. We also get them because we can't get them here. That would be like fruits in the wintertime. It might be some rare earth minerals or some minerals and things that aren't made or aren't found in enough quantities in the United States. That used to be the case, for example, with oil. We didn't have enough oil, so we had to import it. Well, then those are imports, things we bring into the country. We also export things. Now, this one might be a little harder to think about. What kind of things do we export? What do we have that other people want? Turns out we export a lot of food. Grains, beef, pork. We export lots and lots of food to the rest of the world. We export things like oil. Believe it or not, we import oil and we export oil. That's a longer topic, but briefly, we import oil because we need a certain type of oil and we need it in a certain place, and we export oil because we got extra in one place and somebody else needs it. On the whole, though, we are energy self-sufficient. What else do we export? Well, we export military gear, planes and stuff like that to our allies. We export entertainment, Netflix, movies, music. Those are huge exports. Well, which is better? And why? Well, for consumers, imports are nice. And you have to have things. We want to have fruits in the winter and things like that. So imports are good. Financially, for a country, exports are the best. Why? Because as a nation, we get richer. We have more jobs. Our standard of living is higher if money flows into our country. When we import more, money flows out of the country. Anytime we import something, things flow out. Money flows out. When we export, money flows in. Now we can talk about trade and things. The absolute advantage is a case where somebody has the only source of a product. There might be jewels or something, certain rare jewels. I talked about rare earth minerals that are used in like making silicone chips and things. Those would be an advantage. People don't typically have business or countries don't have an absolute advantage. That's pretty rare because typically countries can duplicate what other countries do. But you could have a comparative advantage. You have lower costs than other people. Balance of trade. So we talked about which is better, imports or exports. We talk about a trade surplus when our exports are more than our imports. And a trade deficit when it works the other way, when we're bringing in more than we're sending out. And again, financially, it's much better to have a trade surplus. And the wealth flows into the country as opposed to out. And a good question to think about is if we keep running a deficit, which the United States does, How can we keep doing that? How can we keep sending money out? Well, the answer is partly we have to create more wealth inside so that we can export it. We increase our standard of living, we increase our productivity, we increase our wealth so that money can flow out. Now, there are other ways that money flows out of the country besides trade, and we want to measure all that money going out. How does money go in or out of a country other than imports or exports? Well, think about that. A couple ways. One way is tourism. You go to another country, you buy stuff, you have to pay in that currency. You're taking our money and going somewhere else, or they're coming here, bringing their money here. We also give direct aid to countries. If a country is in trouble, we give them aid. We give them foreign aid. We give them foreign aid even if they're not in trouble. We send $1 billion to Egypt a year, $1 billion to Israel a year to help support those countries. Again, we can have a surplus or a deficit. If money flowing in is bigger than outflow, we have a surplus. And the other way around, we have a deficit. And here you can see how that kind of looks in terms of the balance of payments. The balance of payments here, negative. We import more than we export. It's a little dated. This is from the book, but it hasn't gotten any better. Now, how do we import exports? Well, you can license things. You take trademarks and patents and you let other people use the products. I give here some of the luxury people. Luxottica makes the eyeglasses, and Dior and Gucci and Prada allow them to use their name. Levi's allows Levi jeans to be made elsewhere. Or you can franchise. How you could do international business? Well, you can just contract your manufacturing. This is what Apple does. Apple doesn't make any of their products. All their products are made by a company called Foxconn in China, which is why during the pandemic it was such a big problem. Apple couldn't get any products. Foxconn had completely shut down. Nike manufactures its products in Vietnam, primarily. Outsourcing. Outsourcing, you got to be a little careful. Outsourcing is often associated with international business. You outsource customer support. Right? You call up a company and it's somebody in India or the Philippines or someplace. But outsource doesn't have to mean it goes to another country. Outsourcing just means you're taking part of your business function and you're giving it to another company. Apple is outsourcing manufacturing to Foxconn. Raritan Valley outsources its cafeteria to Culinart. It doesn't mean it's going out of the country. It just means it's going to another company. Another way to do international business is to do alliances. So Fiat and Chrysler work together, Microsoft and Tata. A lot of companies join together so that they have an international presence. Can create joint ventures. This is where two companies come together to make a particular product. So you make a third company where the two companies invest in that company. This is the way that China allows foreign investors today to invest in their country. You can't set up your own business in China. You have to at least do a joint venture with a Chinese company. And foreign direct investment means somebody puts their money here, like BMW will puts in a factory here in the United States. Let's see. Here's an example of multinational firms, companies that are operating in many countries. Obviously, an advantage is you got a lot more customers. Disadvantages, it can be very expensive and you're also exposed. Shell, for example, I believe was one of the companies that was operating in Venezuela. And the country just took over it, took all the operations away from Shell and American businesses as well. So there are difficulties in doing that kind of thing. You have to deal with many laws. Some of this is very difficult.